So the Liquidator event in Battlefield 2042 is officially live, and we've had a few days now to play it. I played it pretty much right as the update went live, and then I've actually just before recording this just done a live stream and played another couple of hours of the new 8 vs 8 mode. And today I wanted to give you guys my first impressions on the event. Now, before we get into it, apologies if in the background you guys can hear some rain. I'm going to do my best to edit that out, but it is absolutely pissing down right now, and there's unfortunately nothing I can do about it. So we will just have to deal with that for this video because it's meant to rain all day, and I need to get this video out there. And then also just quickly as well before we get into it, I'm actually going to be streaming once again sometime next week when the new mode comes, which is the 16 vs 16 squad conquest or tactical conquest, whatever it's called. So be sure to keep your eyes peeled for that. The stream earlier today was a lot of fun, and I think the 16 vs 16 mode is going to be even more enjoyable. So keep your eyes peeled for that. But with that being said, let's get stuck into my thoughts on the event so far. So I've been very keen for this ever since it was announced. I am a fan of the more smaller scale modes in Battlefield games. Certain modes like Rush, for example, are always a lot of fun, and while I do, I love Battlefield for the large scale like conquest and breakthrough and stuff like that. That is what Battlefield generally is, but I really do also enjoy their smaller scale modes. It's always a nice little change of pace. So I've been very keen for this, and I do have some kind of mixed opinions on it, to be honest. Not all of it is good. I do have a lot of good thoughts on it as well though, and we're going to start off with my, I guess, pros from this event so far. So the first thing that I really enjoy about this 8 vs 8 mode at the moment is essentially just the objective based gameplay. It does feel like it is a lot more focused on the objectives, maybe not quite as much as something like Rush, because obviously the game completely revolves around those objectives. If you don't, plant the bombs, you don't get to the next phase. So it's a little bit different in Rush. But for example, in like regular conquest, I do feel a lot of the time, and even for myself, there's not a lot of people always playing the objective. Maybe not so much the case in breakthrough, but in conquest, a lot of it is just, running around having a bit of fun, which is completely fine. And like I said, I play that way too, but I do also really enjoy playing the objective. And so having a smaller scale mode like this where it is a bit more objective based, I am definitely a big fan of that. Now, something else that I really enjoy, which is kind of weird because I don't think I would like this at all in, regular conquest or any of the regular modes, but I actually really enjoy the whole one specialist per squad thing that they've got going on, where you can essentially only have, for example, one McKay per squad, one Sundance per squad. I actually really like that just for this mode. Again, if they added that to conquest, I'm pretty sure I would not be a fan of that, and I think there would be a lot of outrage about that. It can definitely be a little bit annoying if, for example, you want to play McKay and someone else took them. It's a little bit annoying, but I do think it adds a bit to the strategy behind the game, because obviously everyone would just play the best specialists, and then it just doesn't really work the way that they kind of intended those specialists to be. And so doing it this way, like I said, it can be a little bit annoying if someone takes your main, but it kind of also forces you to change things up and pick a specialist that maybe you don't normally play. And for me, that has actually been a lot of fun. I've been playing a few different specialists that I don't normally play as. So like I said, just a general change. If they did that for the whole game, I'd be a little bit annoyed, but for this mode in particular, I think it's actually a pretty cool change. Overall though, for the pros for this game mode, I really am just enjoying the small scale and sort of the change of pace of the mode in general. When you play, conquest or breakthrough for, it's nearly been 12 months now since the game's been out, it does start to get a little bit stale at times, and so just having some different modes like this thrown in there and, having a bit of a different playstyle, I really do enjoy it. And yeah, I can see myself playing a lot more of this tactical conquest over the next coming weeks, especially once it goes to 16 versus 16. Now, moving on to the cons, there are a few cons here that they're definitely a little bit frustrating. And the good thing is that this is only like a weekly event, or a week-long event, I should say. And obviously it is 2 weeks, but there's going to be a 16 vs 16 mode next week. And so even though there are a few little frustrating things, I'm kind of okay with that, because essentially it's only here for a little while and then we'll go back to normal. So it's not the, the end of the world for me if there's a couple of issues. But getting into the issues, I do think that these maps are a little bit too big still for 8 vs 8. I think they'll be really good for 16 vs 16, but there's a lot of times when you're kind of just running around and you sort of can't find anyone. Everyone is very spread out, and even if you do find someone, you'll get into a 1v1, you'll kill them, and then again, you're just kind of wandering around looking for the next enemy. I do think some maps are actually, a pretty decent size, so it's not really every single map, but there are definitely some maps that are just way too big. I think like Caspian Border, for example, that map is almost the same length as it is in actual 32 vs 32 conquest. When you think about it, the A flag and the C flag in this, those flags are actually still the, the outer maps in the regular conquest mode, and obviously there are a few more flags, so it's a bit more spread out, I guess, horizontally, but vertically, or in terms of the length of the map, it's essentially the same length, except that this is 8 versus 8, not 32 versus 32. So, like I said, I do think that some of the maps are a little bit too big, but again, for the 16 versus 16 mode, I think that will be a lot better in most of those cases. Now, something that comes along, I guess, with the size of the map, and just the layout of the map in general, some of the spawns I found are a little bit dodgy. I find people just spawning in the most random spots where there's no logical reason for me to think there's going to be someone spawning there, so I'm like facing the other direction and then I just get killed from behind, or people spawning right next to me without a spawn beacon or anything like that. I've seen a few random spawns here and there that are definitely very confusing, so I think that's mostly just down to probably not enough like playtesting from the devs, because obviously with this being a 2-week event, it's not like they would have spent like 6 months playtesting this mode every single day or anything like that. So again, it's an issue that's not the end of the world, but it is definitely a little bit frustrating if you're going to play this like all day every day. Now, speaking of spawns, the other issue, and this is probably the main issue with this mode for me, is the spawn trapping in this mode is absolutely ridiculous. It is mostly due to the layout of these maps. Most of them are very linear, so it's essentially just a straight line of a map. There's no, I think Discarded is maybe a map that has sort of like a triangular shape to it, so that is a lot less linear, and I haven't run into this issue on that map yet. But most of the other maps in the game, they're very linear, and that means that if you can get your own flag that's closest to your spawn and then you go to the B flag and get that as well, it's very hard for them to actually push past you and get to your initial flag. But then also, once you take out a few of their enemies, like you can push up and take their flag, and at that point they are just spawn trapped. They really cannot get out of that. There have been a few times when, you know, my team was spawn trapping the other team and then they did manage to get past. It's not like it's impossible, but it's pretty hard to do. If the team who's like spawn trapping is just even remotely switched on, it's nearly impossible for that team to push past, because you can kind of just get set up and just wait for them to come to you. And because there's no like vehicles, you can't just get in a chopper and fly over the top of them. You pretty much just have to run straight past the enemies, and with it only being 8 versus 8, there's not that many enemies that you need to worry about when you're the team doing the spawn trapping. If you take out like 2 enemies who are trying to push you, you've taken out a quarter of their team, and so they can't just really push through and work as a team to like get past that spawn trap. So that's the main issue for me right now, is that if you get the other team into a spawn trap, it's pretty much GG on the spot. Like, it has happened a few times where teams have broken out of that spawn trap, like I said, but most of the time it's just next to impossible, and I don't think anyone enjoys spawn trapping, to be honest. Even when you're on the, you know, the trapping end of it, if you're the one doing the spawn trapping, like, even for me personally, that's not that fun. Maybe towards the end of a game, you know, it can be fun a little bit, but a whole match of just sitting there, you know, camping their spawn, that's just not fun for me personally. So hopefully with the 16 versus 16 mode, that should be a little bit better for the team getting spawn trapped, because there's more people for the enemy team to worry about. I think that will be hopefully a little bit fixed in that 16 versus 16 mode. The last thing that I've had a bit of an issue with is that a lot of the OP weapons are actually feeling a bit more OP than they ever have, purely because there's so many 1v1 gunfights. Obviously in a mode like Conquest, for example, there's so many people and there's so many different directions you can be shot from that you can use weapons that aren't necessarily the best in the game. And if you're just good at the game and you know where to position yourself and how to flank enemies and stuff like that, you can still do well with essentially any weapon in the game, because you don't always have to be fighting someone in a, you know, a head-on 1v1 gunfight where they're shooting back at you. You can get a lot of kills where the enemy doesn't even know you're there, for example. Now in this mode, that's a lot harder to do, and I've found that most of the gunfights, like almost every kill that I get, the other enemy is also shooting back at me, and obviously vice versa. Most of the deaths that I get, I'm shooting at that same enemy. Like, there's a lot of 1v1 gunfights, and because of that, I find that there's a bit of a meta going on. Like, you do have to use the good weapons, because if you're getting into a 1v1 gunfight and you're just using some gun that maybe isn't the best, but you really like using it and it's good fun, and then the enemy is just using like the Avantis or the M5A3, they are going to dominate you pretty much every time, and it is making there's kind of becoming a bit of a meta in this mode, which really there hasn't been the whole game. Like, there's not actually been any time. Maybe the PKP early on, and I guess the K30's been pretty dominant, but like I said, in Conquest, even though the K30's been dominant, I feel like I can use another weapon and I don't necessarily do any worse, because you can just slightly change up your playstyle and be a bit more stealthy and flanky, to where you don't have to go into that like head-on 1v1 gunfight against the K30. So that's another issue that's sort of come along with this mode, and I don't think it's necessarily like a permanent thing that's going to hang around in Conquest 2. I do think it's just essentially something to do with this mode, just the fact that it's so small and again so linear that a lot of those gunfights are sort of head on. So those are the pros and the cons for, you know, my opinions on the game mode so far. Now, like I said, next week is going to be 16 versus 16, and for me personally, I think that will actually just fix a lot of these issues. For example, the maps being too big. When you double the player count, I don't think it'll be too big anymore. When you have the spawn trapping issue, the team who's doing the spawn trapping, they're going to have to now pay attention to 16 enemies instead of 8. And even though obviously the spawn trapping team has 16 enemies too, generally when there's more players, like spawn trapping doesn't often happen in the large scale modes, because when there's so many people to sort of take notice of, it is a lot harder to sort of keep track of everyone, if that makes sense. So I do think a lot of these issues will be fixed with the 16 versus 16 mode. Then again, it may bring its own issues, I'm not really too sure, but I'm definitely hanging out for that mode because I'm having a lot of fun with this mode. It has been good fun so far, but I do think the 16 versus 16 mode will be even better. So like I said, be sure to keep your eyes peeled on the channel because I will be streaming that sometime next week, probably about a week after this video goes live roughly. And then just quickly before I end the video too, I'm actually going to be starting to post some short content here on the channel as well, in terms of like actual YouTube shorts, the, you know, less than a minute vertical videos. There's a lot of times when there's like small bits of news that I can't really be bothered dedicating a whole like 10-minute video to, so I just don't bother. But now I'm actually going to start posting whenever there's little bits of news, or even just like if I get good bits of gameplay or whatever, I'm just going to start posting some random little bits of short content. YouTube shorts are starting to sort of take over, and they're allowing channels to grow a little bit easier and also just do something a bit different. It's nice to change up your content every now and then as well. So I'm going to be getting back into the regular streaming schedule of hopefully just once a week if I can, and then also some short content as well. And don't you guys worry, it won't affect the current content that I've been uploading. That will still be the same. I'll be doing 2 to 3 like regular videos per week as well. So keep your eyes peeled for all of that on the channel. But with that being said, thank you guys very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll see you all out there on the battlefield.